Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Outside the Box Score Extra Innings with me, Mark Rollins. Obviously, in this YouTube series, we take a look at things that I wouldn't necessarily talk about on the radio show every Saturday morning, even though it might be something that I'm passionate about. We've done a video with Josh Boheim and I on the Kevin Brown situation in Baltimore, how he was suspended from broadcasting games, and we did a tier list of the best men's college basketball coaches of all time. In this one, I'll just tell you right now, I'm doing it in tier list format again because I'm obsessed with making tier lists. So we're going to be doing a tier list of this year's Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. So that's going to be the 2024 Hall of Fame ballot. A lot of this in the news right now. People are posting their terrible ballots online. This is going to be the best ballot. We're going to get to 10 probably. It's going to be a great ballot. Nothing to worry about. So, without further ado, we're going to get this up. You see, we've got a few different tiers. My ballot might get a future vote. Those are guys that I'm pretty confident that if I don't get them on my ballot this year, they have a pretty good chance of finding a way onto the ballot in the following years. Juice to the gills, that's just going to be A-Rod and Manny Ramirez probably. My personal policy on voting for steroid guys is if you're someone like Bonds, Clemens, Sosa, McGuire, who never failed a drug test and served a suspension handed down by Major League Baseball, you're fair game to vote for. Guys like Manny, A-Rod, someone we'll get to in a few years, Nelson Cruz, which might make me change this rule. If you failed a drug test, got served a suspension, I will not be voting for you. Obviously, I don't have a vote. This is all hypothetical. I've just done this every year for a number of years. So I don't have a real vote. But if I did, I wouldn't be voting for the guys like Manny, A-Rod. As tremendous of players as they were, the suspension handed down by Major League Baseball, that's the tipping point for me. So that's going to be that tier. Hall of Very Good, really good player. I don't think you should be a Hall of Famer, just good. Tier below those guys. There's going to be a couple of them on this list. It was like, yeah, you were a good player, but we're talking about the Hall of Fame here. And then hell tier, because I always have to have a hell tier. That's reserved for one guy on this list, maybe two. Actually, yeah, two at least. I'll have to think about some of the other guys on the ballot, but you'll see who goes in hell tier. Now we're going to do this alphabetically because that's the way it's listed here. So we're going to start with Bobby Abreu, and Bobby Abreu is on my ballot. One of the more underrated players of his entire generation. Bobby played from 1996 to 2014. Didn't play any games in 2013. Came back in 2014 at the age of 40 with the New York Mets. And an incredibly underrated player in a time where, yes, there was some steroid suspicion with Bobby, but in a time where home runs and RBI dominated the sport, Bobby Abreu went out there and would just hit his 40 doubles a year and steal his 25 to 30 bags and rack up hits and consistently get on base. And no one paid attention because he wasn't much of a power hitter. He did have a couple of 30 home run seasons, two. One in 2001, one in 2004, both of which coming with the Philadelphia Phillies, who he's probably most known for playing with. Had a couple of good years with the LA Angels as well. But for me, a guy that always flew under the radar and was just really solid for, let's see, I'll get so 2009, 1998 to 2009. So 12 seasons. And I'll show this on my screen as well because I have Baseball Reference open. So let me just share this with you guys. There we go. From 1998 to 2009, 301 average, 406 on base. He's got a career 395 on base percentage, which was so impressive to me. 406 on base, 497 slugging, good for an OPS plus of 133. That's 33% above league average. 253 home runs doesn't jump out. 1,100 RBI. This guy was driving in 100 runs year in and year out over the course of this time. Over 2,000 hits and 472 doubles. Bobby ended up having 574 career doubles to go along with 288 bombs and 400 stolen bases, 1,300 RBI to go along with that as well. And 2,470 hits. Now, like I said, one of the most underrated players of his generation, and a guy that I started putting on my fictional ballot a couple of years ago. He's starting to gain a little bit of support, but I don't think he'll end up in the Hall of Fame eventually. Just a guy that I've found myself to vote for. So Bobby Abreu is on my ballot. Joey Bats, Jose Bautista. We're going to put him in the Hall of Very Good. Joey Bats, for a few years, was the premier power hitter in baseball. In 2010, hit 54 home runs with Toronto. 2011 followed it up with 47, I want to say. There was a period of time where Jose Bautista was a force to be reckoned with at the plate. And really good player, didn't do enough outside of those few years to be considered any higher for me. We'll always have the bat flip. I mean, come on. That might push him to Hall of Very Good above just good, is the bat flip alone. One of the cooler guys, everyone seemed to like him, follows everybody on Twitter except me. Jose Bautista, follow me on Twitter. He follows like 3 million people, and I'm not one of them. I've been trying for years. So Joey Bats, follow me on Twitter. Yeah, so that's Jose Bautista. Not much to talk about there. Next one, Carlos Beltran. Held out of the Hall of Fame because of the scandal. I don't care. He goes on my ballot. Carlos Beltran. And I'll see if I can get the actual comparison up here because his stats are so close to Andre Dawson. It's not even funny. It's unbelievable how close him and Andre Dawson's stats are. So we'll just get this up here. Let me zoom in on that for you. There we go. Here we go. Carlos Beltran and Andre Dawson. Hits, Dawson had 49 more. Home runs, 3 more. RBI, 4 more. Stolen bases, 2 more. Average, the same. Beltran's got him in on base by a wide margin, almost 30 points. Slugging, 4 points higher for Beltran. Total bases, 36 higher for Dawson. I don't know if you can find two players this similar in terms of their offensive statistics. The value stats are where things start to differ a little bit. Beltran, better defender than Dawson, so that's going to happen. D-WAR 2.0 compared to 1.6. Better offensive player, too, in terms of the offensive WAR there. But a lot of that comes from the on base. So that big discrepancy there is what makes that difference. Beltran also a lot more doubles. Dawson was very homer or nothing for a little while there. Carlos Beltran was such a great all-around player, and people forget it because the thing people think about is that one damn strikeout against Adam Wainwright in 2006. It still haunts Mets fans to this day. Carlos Beltran was a superstar center fielder for a long time. The people that don't vote for Beltran because of the cheating scandal when he was, 86 years old with the Astros, I can't overlook everything else that Carlos Beltran did in his career. He very easily gets onto my ballot. Next one, Adrian Beltre. We're there isn't even much to talk about here. Adrian Beltre is one of the 5 or 6 best third basemen of all time. The fact that someone left him off the ballot this year annoys me, because Adrian Beltre should have been close to a unanimous Hall of Famer. If we can, what are you doing, Baseball Reference? Or my favorite website, and there we go. 477 home runs, 3,166 hits. Zoom that out a little bit. There we go. So 477 home runs, 636 doubles, career 286 average, the WAR up at 93.5, even 121 bags. OPS plus is a little low at 116. He just didn't walk much. Everyone knows how much of a free swinger Beltre was. He was kind of, Vladimir Guerrero-esque in that case. No MVPs, which is surprising to me, and only 4 All-Star games, which is atrocious. This just goes to show that fan voting for the All-Star game. I mean, you're telling me Adrian Beltre didn't make an All-Star game until he was 31 years old? Come on now. Fans screwed him over in terms of awards throughout his career. Easily one of the best third basemen to ever play the game. Great defender as well. Easy Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Should have been close to unanimous. He will be close, but there was that one guy that didn't vote for him. And I don't like that. I don't like that at all. That guy's just trying to prove a point. The only 2 people he voted for were Manny Ramirez and Alex Rodriguez. Come on. Guy's a clown. Moving on to Mark Buehrle. Mark Buehrle was a really good pitcher for a long time. Just consistent innings eater. And for me, he falls in between. I'm actually going to move Juice to the Gills down 1, because to me, they I want Hall of Very Good and might get a future vote next to each other. Buehrle falls right between these 2 for me. I think for now I'm going to put him in the Hall of Very Good, but he was really good, man. And he did it so much differently than anyone else. Just the definition of a crafty lefty. Never threw hard. It was movement. It was location. Very rarely walked people, but he also didn't strike many guys out. Very interesting career for a guy like Mark Buehrle. No hitter, perfect game, World Series champion. A lot of the periphery stuff you love to see, but not necessarily the numbers to back it up. But he was a lot of fun. I always liked Mark Buehrle, and it's not just because we have the same first name. So Mark Buehrle, I'm going to put him Hall of Very Good for now. I might bump him up to might get a future vote later on. Bartolo Colon, Big Sexy, everyone's favorite. Whoops. He was just good. I'm sorry. I love Bartolo. He hit the home run. He was fat. Everybody loved it. He was old. It was great. Won a Cy Young, which is great. It was a bad Cy Young year. He only got it because he won 20 games. I'm sorry, Bartolo. I'm sorry, Mets fans. I love the guy, but I just can't. I can't put him higher than that. He had a lot of good years, pitched forever, but he had some pretty bad years thrown in there as well. I just can't put him any higher than that. Adrian Gonzalez, you're going to the Hall of Very Good. We'll always have those 2010, 2011 Red Sox with guys like Adrian Gonzalez and Adrian Beltre. It just fell short at the end. Home runs, I want to say he came close to cracking 400, but I don't believe he got there. I'll double check that. Oh, no, not even close. He had 317. Was done by the age of 36. Was a really good player for a number of years. When he was on the Padres, had that 40 home run season. Yeah, man. It was 2011, 2012, excuse me, not 2010, 2011 when he was on Boston. But really good player, you're going into the Hall of Very Good. Quite simple. Todd Helton, longtime Rockies first baseman. I will die on this hill. Todd Helton should have been in the Hall of Fame a long time ago. He's been on my ballot every single year that he's been on the ballot. I voted for him. Todd Helton was a stud, and I don't want to hear any of this Coors Field BS. Larry Walker's in the Hall of Fame now. We finally got one in. We can do it for a guy that played his entire career there. 855 career OPS on the road, by the way, which is just about the same as George Brett. And no one had any problems with George Brett going into the Hall of Fame. And I don't either. George Brett, one of the greatest third basemen of all time. Todd Helton, one of 27 players in the history of Major League Baseball to slash 300, 400, 500 over the course of his career. He was a doubles machine, underrated pop. He didn't hit a ton of home runs because that wasn't his game. We need to stop penalizing guys for not being massive power hitters. I said it with Bobby Abreu. I'm going to say it with Todd Helton. I'm probably going to say it again on this ballot. You don't have to hit for a lot of power to be a really good hitter. Todd Helton was one of the better pure hitters in baseball for a long time, and he didn't get credit for it because he played in Colorado. I'm going to say the same thing that people say about steroids. Colorado doesn't magically make you a good hitter. You still have to be able to have the hand-eye coordination and the pure ability to hit the baseball to succeed there. And that's what Todd Helton had. And that's what he did. He succeeded for a long time. I was having a discussion on social media the other day. I pulled up, and I will get this on my phone so I can read the exact stats out to you. It was about if Todd Helton should be in the Hall of Fame, and I'm very pro Helton. And like I said, have been for a long time. Where is it? There it is. I compared Todd Helton, his best 10 years, so 10 consecutive years, the best 10-year stretch in his career, which is a long time. A lot of people look for 7. I was looking for 10 to show how good he was. Best 10-year stretch compared to Edgar Martinez and Willie McCovey. 2, no doubt, Hall of Fame first baseman. Edgar was a DH. I know he played third base, but similar play styles. So Hall of Fame first base and a DH. Helton, 333, 432, 585. That was his slash line for a decade. He hit 333 for 10 years. Ended up with a 316 career batting average, by the way. 298 home runs, 1,076 RBI, and 453 doubles. That's 45 doubles a year. Extra base hit machine for a decade. Edgar Martinez, 325. So lower, significantly lower average than Helton. 435 on base. Barely got him in on base. Got him by 3 points. 558 slugging. So that 585 just flipped those last 2 numbers. 231 home runs. Everyone knows Edgar wasn't a huge power hitter. 910 RBI. 367 doubles. So another guy who's an extra base hit machine didn't even come close to Helton in terms of total extra base hits over the best 10 years in his career. Willie McCovey, 283 average. Willie wasn't, he was a big swing and miss guy. I'm not going to hold the average against him. 391 on base, surprisingly high. I actually thought that was going to be lower. I was impressed by how high Willie McCovey's on base was. 557 slugging. That's the thing. Willie McCovey at 521 career home runs, a significantly bigger slugger than Helton or Martinez. And his slugging percentage is the lowest out of this group. Because he had 326 home runs over that decade, so 32 a year, insane. 916 RBI also surprised me that he didn't even crack 1,000. Only hit 193 doubles. That's where the slugging percentage falls down. His slugging percentage carried a lot more by home runs than it is other extra base hits. So that's 2 no doubt Hall of Famers, 2 people that everyone agrees should be it. And Todd Helton. Why wouldn't he be in? If we're comparing the guys that are two of the best to ever do it, Todd Helton's absolutely on that list. I will go to bat for this guy every single year. Matt Holliday, maybe, and I'm not going to say that, one of the more interesting guys on the ballot. We have a very interesting ballot this year. A lot of guys that are better than you remember if you take a look at the stats, but a lot of people wouldn't realize it. Matt Holliday is going and might get a future vote for me. He's the first one in there, and I'll show you the baseball reference page. Now, you're not going to see a lot of bold. You're not going to see a lot of black or gray ink, is what it's called. What you are going to see are a lot of all-stars, a lot of MVP votes, silver sluggers, rookie, finished fifth in rookie of the year voting. I don't really care about rookie of the year voting. It's cool if a guy wins it, but it's rookie of the year can be so up and down. And the counting numbers aren't super high. Barely over 2,000 hits, 316 home runs, 1,200 RBI. I get it. I'm not going to sit here and say Matt Holliday is a no-doubt guy, but when I look at this and I see a 299 career average and a 379 on base and a slugging over 500, OPS plus of 32% higher than league average, Matt Holliday was really good, man. He was just really good. And again, Colorado for the first part of his career, I don't care. I don't care that he played in Colorado. I saw Not Gaetti, I want to say it was Not Gaetti on Twitter, say this earlier. We talk about these guys that played in Colorado. We don't look at Christy Mathewson's numbers and be like, oh, he played in the Polo Grounds. No, we look at Christy Mathewson's numbers and say, wow, that guy might be the best pitcher to ever play the game. I don't care where he played. Because then he goes to St. Louis. Well, first he went to Oakland, and that didn't last because it's Oakland. What are they going to do? Pay him? They trade him to St. Louis and just puts up numbers. Just does the Matt Holliday thing and puts up numbers. Career ended a little prematurely. 38 years old. That's, a really good run, but only played 15 years. That also accounts as to why some of the counting numbers aren't higher. I'm not going to vote for him this year. But this is a guy that could hang around and I could see gaining momentum like a guy that played for the same team as him and has similar numbers, Scott Rowland. Now, Rowland, obviously, incredible defender at third base. So that really is what got him in. Holliday's WAR is pretty low, 44.5. I don't think he's going to get into the Hall of Fame. But I could see him sneaking onto my ballot in future years. So we're going to throw him there. One of my favorites, Torrey Hunter. God, a guy I loved watching. He's going in there as well. He's a guy that I would love to vote for if I had the room. And I don't think this year I will. Yeah, we're probably going to get to 10 just looking at the rest of this. So I'm going to put him there. Again, this is one of those guys. I think he was a lot better than people remember him being, because people remember the defensive highlights and, like him robbing Barry Bonds at the All-Star game of a home run. And this guy had 353 career home runs. He won 9 Gold Gloves. He had 2,400 hits, 498 doubles. The problem, never led the league in anything. Not once. But he played 19 years, good offensive numbers. He goes there. He goes and might get a future vote because there's something to be said. And there's this thing in the Hall of Fame voting criteria called the character clause. And I hate it, but it is a thing. There's something to be said about being a really good guy. And Torrey Hunter is the man. He was always the man. Loved watching him play. And I hope he sticks around on the ballot for a while. I don't know how he's been on for a few years. So I don't know how long he'll stick around, but I hope he gets his 10 years on the ballot because he deserves it. He deserves a long look at the Hall of Fame. I love Torrey Hunter. Always have. Next up, Andrew Jones. Ballot. It took me a couple years to come around to Andrew Jones. It did. When he first came on the ballot, I was bitter. I was very bitter. And it was because Jim Edmonds was only on the ballot for 1 year. And Jim Edmonds was a tremendous player. And he was my favorite center fielder to watch outside of Ken Griffey Jr. really growing up. I loved watching Jim Edmonds. And I thought he was just as good of a defender as a guy like Andrew Jones. The numbers don't back that up. This is just the eye test. This was a few years ago. Andrew Jones, obviously, arguably the best defensive center fielder in the history of baseball. I personally would say Willie Mays, but you can make the argument. And so I was like, why would this guy with a 250 career batting average? And if your average is going to be that low, you better hit a lot of home runs. And he hit 430, which is good. But for 250 average, I was like, you got to be Harmon Killebrew. You got to knock over 500. And I thought about it, and I was like, the defense, the fact he came up when he was 20 years old for a World Series contending team and did so much at such a young age and did have 10 really good years. 10. Before and it's a shame that his career essentially ended at the age of 30. Because we could have seen a guy that hit 500, 550 home runs while playing center field. Something that very few guys have done. Mickey Mantle, Willie Mays, Ken Griffey Jr. These are the type of names he'd be in the same company as. And the offensive numbers aren't great. But they're very, very good. I would say, but a lot of them aren't great. But the defense was truly transcendent. So I came around to Andrew Jones. And keep that Jim Edmonds thing in the back of your mind, by the way, because I want to talk about guys that only stay on the ballot for 1 year a little bit towards the end of this video, because some of these guys, in my opinion, should be in the Hall of Fame and only stay on for a year. But there's one specific guy that we're going to talk about that along with. Next up, Victor Martinez. I'm going to put him just good. I'm going to pull up the baseball reference right now. Maybe I'll bump him up after having a look at this. Yeah, you know what? We can bump him up to the Hall of Very Good, I think. Spent a lot of his career as a catcher, 295 average, 246 home runs, 1,100 RBI. Victor Martinez. See, this is what I mean about looking at the Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. Victor Martinez, I remember him being a good player. I remember him being a very good player. These numbers are a lot higher than I would have said they were. 360 on base, 455 slugging. Yeah, we're going to move him into the Hall of Very Good. So Victor Martinez, you are now a member of the Hall of Very Good. Congratulations. Next up, Joe Mauer. Huh? No. Joe Mauer is no doubt Hall of Famer in my eyes. Absolute slam dunk. No doubt Hall of Famer. Because you look at these numbers and you're probably going to say, well, Mark, we just looked at Victor Martinez's numbers and, some of these are pretty similar. I understand. But you look at these, get that one bigger. There we go. 3 batting titles, most ever by a catcher. 306 average, 388 on base. most ever by a catcher. 428 doubles, 2,100 hits. Career was derailed due to concussions, sadly. The Twins had two MVP teammates that had their careers ended too short because of concussions, and Mauer and Justin Morneau. And this is what I mean. You don't have to be a power hitter. He had 28 home runs once, never hit more than 13 outside of that. Whatever. I don't care. Because when you're hitting 347 or 328 or 327 or 324, 319, I didn't even mention the 365 because that's year at 28 home runs. When your average is that good and your on base is consistently above 400, I don't care if you hit 10 home runs. Joe Mauer is one of the best pure hitters in baseball for a decade. Guys, and as a catcher, easy slam dunk, no doubt Hall of Famer for me. And that's why Buster Posey is going to be an easy first ballot slam dunk guy for me because very similar. Joe Mauer and Buster Posey are very similar. If you think Buster Posey is a Hall of Famer, you also need to think Joe Mauer is a Hall of Famer because I've seen people say that they think one is and one isn't. No, they're both. You got to throw them both in the same category because they're very similar players. So Joe Mauer, easy on my ballot. We're already up to 6, by the way. See how easy it is to vote for a lot of people and not just vote for one or two? I feel like I've been quite convincing in my argument for all of these guys. It's pretty easy to vote for not just one or two guys and give guys their due when they deserve it. Andy Pettitte, Hall of Very Good. ERA is too high for me for his career to consider him a Hall of Famer. Very similar to Mark Burley. The ERA is just too high. Andy Pettitte was a really good pitcher. Obviously, great postseason numbers, which, big reason why the Yankees dynasty was the Yankees dynasty. A lot of wins. I don't really care. I'm not a wins guy. Pedro Martinez had like 218 career wins. Do we really need to say Andy Pettitte was better because he won more games? No. Personally, for me, he's not a Hall of Famer. And if you see me wearing all this Red Sox stuff and say it's Yankee bias, absolutely not. I do not have any bias when looking at this ballot, except for guys we'll get to in a minute. There might be a little bias coming up in a second, but it's okay bias. And yeah, actually, wait a minute. No, I forgot. Or did he serve a suspension? He admitted to using roids. Nah, we'll keep him in there. I don't remember. I'm going to look up if he served a suspension. No, he did not serve a suspension, so he's not going in juice to the gills. Yeah, Andy Pettitte, Hall, very good. I have no problems, no qualms with Andy Pettitte. There's a couple of really good years in Houston, too. People forget. So I'm going to throw him there. That dude, BP. The man. He was just good. I love Brandon Phillips. One of my favorite players to watch. Just a smooth operator at second base. Loved watching him play. Hit some big home runs in his career, too. He was good. He was a good player. So, not much else to say about that. Manny Ramirez, already mentioned it, juice to the gills. He got suspended 3 times. He got caught. He was like, all right, what if I just do it one more time? Then he got caught again. He's like, all right, but I won't get caught this time. He got caught again. I love Manny. I'm wearing all Red Sox stuff right now. One of my favorite players growing up. And I maintain one of the best hand-eye coordination, plate vision guys in the history of baseball. I don't know if there were 10 better right-handed hitters than Manny Ramirez in terms of their ability to hit a baseball. He was on the same level as Miguel Cabrera in his prime. Like that type of production year in and year out. The numbers, obviously fantastic. Over 500 home runs, average over 310, high on base. All the numbers are great. Don't get caught. Jose Reyes. This is where the bias comes in. Yeah. Don't beat women is pretty much what that boils down to. Wouldn't get a vote for me. Loved him, loved watching him play. Loved those Mets teams growing up, but yeah, won't get a vote from me. A-Rod, juice to the gills. Like I said, I'm not voting for you if you served a suspension. That's my line. So A-Rod, obviously all the numbers, 3,000 hits, 696 career home runs, the MVPs, everything that goes along with A-Rod. He was a shortstop. He was a really good defensive shortstop. Ended up moving to third base to play next to a much worse defensive shortstop, which I'll never understand. Yes, I'm one of the guys that thinks Jeter was a bad defensive shortstop, and the numbers back me up. I just can't do it. It's just my policy. I don't vote for those guys. There's one that I might end up voting for in the coming years, and that's Nelson Cruz. But that's just because he's the only guy that served a suspension and then got better for like 8 years after it. He was better after steroids than he was on steroids. It's the only reason I would consider it with Nelson Cruz. Next up, K-Rod. This is where it gets tough. Because I've got 6 guys on my ballot. And looking at this, actually, we'll just do this. We're going to stop going in alphabetical order for a second because I have to narrow this down to see who's going on my ballot right now. So we're just going to roll through these. J-Roll, Jimmy Rollins, Hall of Very Good. James Shields, just good. You can't give yourself a nickname. He gave himself the nickname Big Game James. That's no bueno. You can't do that. No. And Omar Vizquel, hell. So that leaves us with 5 players for 4 spots. These are 5 players that I think should be in the Hall of Fame. I do. And this is why we'll have this discussion now. The one and dones, guys that only get 1 year on the ballot that I think probably should be in the Hall of Fame. And I'm going to throw him on here because I want for this to get hurt. David Wright right now is tracking at like 3% on the Hall of Fame ballot tracker. Very low. You need 5% of the vote to stay on the ballot for a year. And David Wright is tracking right now to not hit that. That sucks. David Wright was one of the 2 or 3 best third basemen in baseball in his prime. Sometimes the best. People don't remember just how good David Wright was. People remember the back injuries that held him out for so long. But you look at these numbers. And the back really started here in 2013. And after that, he was gone. But leading up to 2013, let's just grab those numbers. Because we don't want to look at the grossness that's below that. You want to see a guy that for 10 seasons, hit 300 with a 382 on base and a 506 slugging. It's 37% better than the league average hitter. Guy that averaged 22 home runs, 88 RBI, 18 stolen bases, 34 doubles a year. A guy that didn't strike out. A guy that liked to draw his walks and work at bats, all while playing a really great defensive third base. And I know the numbers are low, I know he only had 1,700 hits over the course of his career, only had 240 home runs, only had 970 RBI. I can't not vote for him. He was so good. He was great. David Wright was a great player for a decade. And that's what the Hall of Fame's about. It's about celebrating guys like this. Guys that, for people my age, I saw the entirety of David Wright's career. I started watching baseball in 2004, his rookie year. I saw the entirety of his career. Guy probably should have won an MVP. Or at least was in the conversation for MVPs. The Hall of Fame celebrates guys that transcended the sport. And I think David Wright did, at least in the opinion of a lot of people. And I'm not even a Mets fan, but I used to go out of my way to watch Mets games so I could watch David Wright play baseball. I know a lot of people did the same thing. He meant more than just the stats on the field. He was the Mets version of Jeter. He's the career Mets leader in like half of their offensive categories. It's like him and Darryl Strawberry. That's it. But he was a better player than Darryl Strawberry. And then I see that he might fall off the ballot. What? David Wright? He might suffer the same fate as Carlos Delgado, who deserves a long look at being in the Hall of Fame. Carlos Delgado, a teammate of his, deserves a very long look. In my opinion, probably should be in the Hall of Fame. Jim Edmonds, that I talked about earlier. I'm going to see if I can find a list. Because there are certain people that you look at it and it's like they only had one chance. Oh, this is perfect. This is absolutely perfect. You've got a whole roster of guys that were one and dones. John Olerud. I make that bigger for you. John Olerud was a great player. Bobby Grich, I'm not a huge Bobby Grich guy, but I see the vision for the stats guys. I understand that they want Bobby winning. So John Olerud. Lance Berkman is another one. I think Lance Berkman should probably be in the Hall of Fame. Lance Berkman was like a top 5 hitter in baseball for a decade and no one cared because he played in Houston. Lance Berkman was a great player. Kenny Lofton should be in the Hall of Fame. Jim Edmonds, like I said, Willie Randolph is very close. Jimmy Wynn didn't receive a single vote. Not one vote for Jimmy Wynn. Lou Whitaker. You just look at these names. And see, Kevin Brown, I've made that argument for years. Johan Santana. Johan Santana being a one and done is ridiculous to me. He had 8 years where his ERA was 2.87. He won 2 Cy Youngs. There was 8 years where Johan Santana was arguably the best pitcher in baseball. Dave Stieb deserves a close look. All of these guys that fell under the radar for Lord knows what reason. I mean, I look at this list and see guys that, like I said, I think Kenny Lofton should be in. I think Lance Berkman's very close. I think Jim Edmonds should be in. I think Kevin Brown should be in. I think Johan Santana should be in. And I think David Wright should be in. So there we go. He's going on my ballot. Next up, I have to put Billy Wagner on here. If you know anything about me, I've been clamoring for Billy Wagner to get in since he first showed up on the ballot. He's the second most dominant closer in the history of baseball. Fight me. It's Mariano Rivera, Billy Wagner, and they're not that far off. I know Rivera had all the saves, which is great. Billy Wagner is the second most dominant closer in the history of baseball. I maintain that. The fact he's not in the Hall of Fame is a joke. His career ERA is like 2.3. Trevor Hoffman's is 2.8. Billy Wagner, you're on my ballot. That brings us up to 8. Gary Sheffield. 300 average, 500 home runs. The steroid issue is kind of there, but he falls in the same category as Bonds, Clemens, those guys. Never got caught. Gary Sheffield was a great player for a long time. And the only reason he hasn't gotten in is because of that steroid issue. And I will continue to vote for him, just as I voted for Bonds and Clemens. I can't keep going for it because this is last year on the ballot, and he's tracking right now to not get in. So I'll show my support for Gary Sheffield in this, his 10th and final year on the ballot, because he was a great player for a long time, and I think it's ridiculous that he's not in the Hall of Fame yet. Oh, boy. K-Rod and Chase Utley. Got one spot left. Two guys that I'm very on the fence about. One of them is going to go on my ballot. One of them isn't. One of them is going to go very easily into the might vote later, because if I had room, I absolutely would vote for both of them, but I don't. Since you only get 10 spots. I'm going to put K-Rod on my ballot. And we're going to put Utley and might get a future vote. Because I think K-Rod needs it more right now. I think he needs the support more right now. He's, again, just dominance over the course of his career. I know he had a couple of rough years there in like Milwaukee and Baltimore, but Angels and on the Mets too. He had 1 or 2 bad years on the Mets, but closers are volatile. Always have been, always will be. Mariano Rivera was just a failed starter. And obviously he was the greatest closer of all time. I'm not denying that, but he was a failed starter. So the closer position has always been volatile. I think he needs the support more right now. I'm going to move Chase Utley to the top of this because he's not might get a future vote. It's he will get a future vote, because I think Chase Utley should be in the Hall of Fame. Very similar reasons to David Wright, except I think Wright just doesn't get the same love as Utley. Maybe it's because he was a third baseman and not a second baseman, and the second base position is really weird with the Baseball Hall of Fame. Like Jeff Kent isn't in, and that blows my mind that Jeff Kent didn't make the Hall of Fame, because guy has the most home runs ever by a second baseman. Seems like you're pretty much a shoo-in for the Hall. But he never ended up getting in 10 years. Utley, better defender, really good offensive player, and hated by baseball fans everywhere for ending Ruben Tejada's poor career. Specifically, Mets fans hate him, but a lot of fans hate Chase Utley. I always loved him. He was always one of my favorite players to watch. I loved how hard-nosed he played. The Ruben Tejada slide, that was tough. I'm not going to sit here and defend that. That was really tough. But guy was a stud, man. And if I had the room, he would absolutely go on my ballot. It's just not this year, Chase. You'll be there. You will absolutely be there. So that's it. That's what we got. Bobby Abreu, Carlos Beltran, Adrian Beltre, Todd Helton, Andrew Jones, Joe Mauer, David Wright, Billy Wagner, Gary Sheffield, and K-Rod, Francisco Rodriguez. Other guys, like I said, Utley, Holiday, Torrey Hunter might get a future vote from me. Depends on how packed the ballot is that year. Hall of Very Good, Burley, Joey Bats, Adrian Gonzalez, Victor Martinez, Andy Pettit, Jimmy Rollins, Manny and A-Rod were juiced to the gills. Big Sexy Bartolo Colon, Brandon Phillips, that dude BP, and Big Game James Shields in Just Good, and Jose Reyes and Omar Vizquel in Hell Tier. If you don't know why, look it up. So that's it. That's my 2024 Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. I do this every year. It's one of my favorite things to talk about. I love the Baseball Hall of Fame. I go like 3 times a year. Cooperstown is my favorite place on earth. So this is something I'm very passionate about, something I love to talk about. And I will do this until the Baseball Hall of Fame gives me a vote. Then I'll still do this. But then my vote will be official. So once they finally change it from being the Baseball Writers Association of America, who do not do a great job at a lot of things, they do a good job. I will say, I do think they do a good job. There's just some clowns in it that I don't think should have a vote. Quite simple. So once they expand it to other media members and they get me a vote, that's all I want in life. I'll keep doing this, but yeah, this was my Baseball Hall of Fame ballot. Let me know what you think of my ballot. Share yours. This was the entire list right here, so now you know all the players. Share, who do you think should be in the Hall of Fame? Am I crazy for putting David Wright and Bobby Abreu on my ballot? I say no. I say I'm the most sane person here for doing that. But maybe you don't agree. Let's have a discussion about it. So there it is. It went a lot longer than I thought it was going to. I tend to rant, and I'm doing it right now. But thank you, everybody, for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the Score 1260. Make sure to tune in Outside the Box Score with me, Mark Rollins, every Saturday morning at 11 on the Score 1260. It's also live right here on YouTube and Twitch. So make sure to check that out. It's usually not just me, my intern Braylon, Josh Boheim. We have guests. Talked to Greg Paulus recently. Great conversation with Coach Greg Paulus. Always interesting guests, always interesting things happening on Outside the Box Score. So make sure to check out the live show every Saturday morning at 11. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.